In the early 1900s, Black farmers owned over 16 million acres across America. This land represented economic independence and food security for many communities. By 2023, only a fraction remained in Black hands. But the land remembers. The soil holds stories of innovation, of agricultural expertise developed across generations. Today, we stand at the intersection of history and possibility. Climate change threatens our food systems. Communities search for sustainable solutions. And Black farmers and cultivators are reclaiming spaces, reviving traditions, and creating new pathways to sovereignty. But this restoration isn't just ecological. It's economic, it's cultural, it's revolutionary. Hi, I'm Keionna Thomas, Program Coordinator for BRAID with the EcoWomanist Institute Southeast, and this is BRAIDEd. Welcome to BRAIDEd, a podcast where we weave together stories of Black agricultural heritage, ecological wisdom, and community resilience. Each episode will explore how Black women are reclaiming our relationship with the land and creating pathways to food sovereignty and climate justice. We're braiding together the wisdom of our ancestors with innovative solutions for today. We're braiding together individual efforts into collective action. We're braiding together healing practices for our communities and for the earth itself. Our journey begins today, Earth Day 2025, as we examine the historical context of Black land ownership, the systematic dismantling of our agricultural heritage, and the powerful movement to reclaim what was lost. We'll explore different relationships with land from the unique perspective of Black Americans. On today's episode, I'm honored to be joined by Ms. Valerie Hill Rawls, founder of the EcoWomanist Institute Southeast, who will share why she created this visionary organization and introduce us to the BRAID cohort program, which opens for applications next month. So whether you're a farmer, an activist, a policymaker, or someone who simply cares about justice and sustainability, this podcast is for you. Let's grow together.
Time bends differently when measured in seasons rather than clocks. What was taken was never truly gone, merely sleeping in memory's soil. There is a language older than words spoken in the curve of rivers and the patient growth of roots and hands that remember. We carry maps inside us to places we've never been. The earth holds no grudges, only possibilities waiting in each handful of soil, each raindrop, each seed. To reclaim is not to possess, but to remember how to listen, how to tend, how to honor what remains. Between loss and restoration lies a space of wild potential where ancestral wisdom meets tomorrow's dream. What flows through our veins also flows through the land, an unbroken current, connecting what was severed. We are both the broken and the menders, both the lost and the found.
I am now joined by Valerie Hill Rawls, founder of the EcoWomanist Institute Southeast. Ms. Valerie, thank you so much for being here on our very first episode.
It is my honor and a privilege to be here with you, Keionna.
I want to start at the beginning with someone who you speak of very often, your father, Marshall Hill, who once said, "Slim, if you ever get back home, get some land and do good." How did those words shape your journey to founding the EcoWomanist Institute?
That journey started long before I came to Atlanta, that's for sure. So my father, as you well know, is the son of a Mississippi sharecropper. And he was a true outdoorsman. He loved being outside. And he taught my sisters and I very early on that we are the ecosystem and we're not separate from it. So nature and land was always sacred to us. And when I came to Atlanta 18 years ago now, 17 years ago, I actually was acquiring 728.5 acres of land to build a green, sustainable, mixed-use community through the lens of geosphere, biosphere, and social sphere. And that was the first soiree into doing what I was told to do. Slim, if you ever get home, get some land and do good. And that got us on this trajectory to launch the EcoWomanist Institute, to have an organization that was centered around eco-spirituality, environmental justice, and ethics. So that was the beginning.
That's incredible. And when we look at the statistics, Black Americans have lost 98% of land that we once owned. This is solely due to discriminatory government policies and outright violence. And it can definitely raise a number of different emotions. How do you transform that gruesome history into a vision for restoration and healing?
Well, I think for me, because my father grew up on the land and my family were earth keepers, like I shared, my grandfather was a Mississippi sharecropper. We also knew the beauty of the bounty and spending time in nature. So most people, yes, we have had land loss. I will say that, the trauma of that, and the trauma of the most egregious entrepreneurship, a form of entrepreneurship in farming, which is sharecropping. But there was so much joy on that land. There was so much love on that land. That was a place of sacred time with family. And also the joy of that really helps me stay grounded in, yes, we have lost a lot, but haven't we, as people of color, of African descent? We have done that, but we also rise to the occasion when it's time to remember the good as well as the bad. So I would hope that during the course of your time on BRAIDEd and the different individuals that you'll be interviewing, they're going to share with you the joy and the pain of land lost, land ownership, and the constant striving to maintain ownership of it.
Right. You touch a little bit about the relationships with the land. And could you talk a little bit more about how it's different from other communities when we talk specifically about Black women's connection to farming and land stewardship?
It's interesting you would ask the difference between, because I actually wrote a paper while doing a project for my New Testament class, because during COVID, when I got tired of always baking cookies and sending them people across the country, I decided to go to seminary and get my master's in public theology. I had to write a paper about a current issue. And that current issue for me was land justice and power for women. And I started by saying that unlike Black women, white women look at the lens of horticulture, garden club, this leisure activity, where Black women, on the other hand, it was a form of survival. How do you take care of your children? Growing the foods that you knew that were accustomed to the climate and to our culture. So I think the relationship that women of color have always had with land has been nurture and the nature coming together to create the health and well-being for their families and communities. And so I really leaned into my entire thesis, which was land, power, and justice for women. So when I talk about the arc of my historical look at women and agriculture, that's where the biblical precedence comes in. But then I can also say that in the 1800s, I know that, again, Black women were farming, owning land, and it just propels me to stand on their shoulders to do the same thing, to make sure that we have land and other women have access to it, because that's the hardest piece of any type of venture that requires land. It's access. And like I said before, own it and maintain it.
Thank you so much for that context. And I think that was one thing that really stood out when I met Miss Valerie, was just hearing that real experience about land and connection to it. So with that, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk specifically about the BRAID program, which stands for the Black Restorative Agriculture Incubation and Development. How was this name developed, and what was the significance of BRAID?
Well, as you well know, when our dear ancestors were chained and shackled and placed in these dark, dank spaces of going somewhere they knew not, the women, again, were astute enough to weave seeds into their hair. So they knew wherever they were going, they would be able to sustain themselves by planting food. So when you look at braid, literally it is about restoration. It's about the history of braiding the seeds in our hair and weaving for a future that we didn't know, but we knew we needed to eat when we got there. I always felt that women entrepreneurs in the agricultural sector have always taken a back seat to men, like in most sectors. And early in the 1800s, Black women owned land, and they also owned their partner, who was perceived to be culturally or socially as a slave, but it wasn't. And so if you go back to the 1800s and start to look at, we could take even a step back further from a biblical perspective, that the first land transaction were 5 daughters who went to Moses and said, "Hey, you will not be given the land to Bupuki and Radi, our kingsmen redeemers. We would prefer to keep our father's land and legacy with they were all girls, right? And being one of 3 girls, that resonated with me. And then in the 1932, 34 window, the first legal precedent that was written for women to own land, they centered it around that transaction that had taken place back in the Old Testament. And so I believe that spiritually, naturally, we are the caretakers and we take care of land as well and have. But again, the eraser of history will want us to think that we weren't landowners, that we weren't taking care of community through agricultural and cultural growing methodologies. And I like to see that come back to the forefront, that we remember who we were before the world tried to tell us who we were not.
And you always mention this we, that we are in this. Can you explain the philosophy behind no one is in it for themselves? We're in this together?
I come from a time where when we were colored and there was a collective power in community, and we're a communal people. And so I don't stand in an individualistic space of understanding because I don't know what that's like. I know what it's like to ask for sugar from your neighbor across the street and get it, and for the door to have a knock on it, and maybe the neighbor down the street needed milk and they got it. I don't live in a world that is centered around us four and no more. I live in a world that is abundant for all, and it's inclusive for me, and it really doesn't have to do with DEI because we definitely earned that. So I just believe in community. I know we're stronger together.
And this seems especially important given the climate challenges that Black farmers face today, right?
Absolutely. And the reason BRAID won't be monocropping, as you well know, it will be a collective growing strategy that we will grow a variety of items that can become value added. So we can find ourselves on retail spaces, in our own CSAs, selling value added products, because monocropping is what got us here, where big ag has just taken over and created unhealthy food systems because of monocropping.
And can you tell us how this connects to historical Black-led farming practices?
Like I said before, let's start with the women who were bringing these seeds with them. They were growing before they were captured and enslaved and brought to this country, which had an agricultural system with the indigenous people who lived here before we were brought here. And so I think those ancestral practices have always been here. But unfortunately, when Big Ag just started to eradicate the knowledge that they didn't even have until we got here, it's just a matter of going back to those growing practices and methodologies that are not only good for people, but good for the planet. And it helps to mitigate some of the greenhouse gas emissions and the climate change issues that we're facing now.
Absolutely. And before we close out, are there any final words you'd like to share about the BRAID cohort in particular, as we really see your vision starting to come to life this spring?
This was originally a working title of Black Women Future Farmers Incubator. And then when we were blessed enough to be a part of the Justice 40 Accelerator, that helped really propel the project even further. And the Justice 40 Accelerator, actually, we were the last cohort before this administration came in. It enables the cohort members, the alumni, now we are too, to tap into various funding sources. One in particular, starting with the federal government, we had never ventured into that space because I believed in a diversified funding stack to maintain our time of and tenure, if you will, if we just lean too heavily on one funding source. So through that, we were able to invest our technical assistance dollars and build out the program a lot more. You are now on board as a program officer for BRAID, and I'm excited about the fact that we'll be releasing the application. The branding is spot on, and I lean into that, coming from 40 years of owning a marketing firm. So it's all packaged and ready to go, and now it's just time for us to bring it to the world and invite young, bright, and even brilliant legacy farmers to come on this journey with us. You and I have had the pleasure of spending time with, as now we're members of the Black National Food Justice Alliance. So it's growing our collective body of partners and folks that we can learn from and share information with. So I think the time is right, both socially, economically, and spiritually, for us to remember when we were colored and how well we worked together to get to where we are now.
I want to thank Ms. Valerie for sharing her vision with us today. The BRAID cohort program will begin accepting applications in May 2025. For more information, visit ewise.org or contact us at braid@ewise.org. Join us for our next episode on Memorial Day, Seeds of Resilience, where we'll explore generational wisdom and healing historical wounds with special guest Dr. Catherine Meeks. We'll connect Memorial Day themes to remembering our agricultural heritage and honor the resilience and knowledge of sharecropper generations. Until then, this has been BRAIDEd, weaving connections, cultivating justice, harvesting change.
BRAIDEd is a production of the EcoWomanist Institute Southeast. This episode was produced by Could Be Pretty Cool. Editing and sound design by Trinity Jackson. Special thanks to Miss Valerie for sharing her vision and perspective, to the EcoWomanist Institute Southeast team, our various partners, mentors, and cultivators for their dedication to this work. For more information, please visit ewise.org. Thank you for listening.